you break a bone, right? And you just go get an X-ray.
Yeah, pretty standard procedure.
Right. And it's a very comforting process, really, because you can actually see the mechanics of the problem. I mean, the doctor points to that jagged white line on the film, and you just immediately understand what's broken and, well, how to fix it.
You literally see the fracture.
Exactly. But predicting the mechanics of a global geopolitical crisis,
Yeah.
yeah, that has basically never worked that way.
Not at all.
Historically, trying to figure out how nations will react to severe threats is, I mean, it's less like reading an X-ray and way more like trying to read tea leaves in a dark room.
Absolutely. Because traditionally it relies so heavily on just human intuition, and psychological profiling of world leaders, plus historical precedents that, frankly, might not even apply to modern warfare anymore.
Right.
Analysts essentially have to guess how a country will respond based on emotion, national pride, domestic political pressure, all these really messy variables.
Messy is the perfect word for it. But today, though, you, our listener, sent us this source document that attempts to put a geopolitical crisis through a totally different kind of diagnostic machine.
The completely emotionless one.
Yeah. We are looking at this highly specific experiment where an author tested the analytical capabilities of a commercially available artificial intelligence, specifically Gemini 3.1.
Which is a very powerful model.
Very. And they wanted to see what happens when you just remove human emotion from the equation entirely and ask a machine to map out a massive military retaliation.
Now, before we dive into the actual scenario, I think we need to set some boundaries here.
Yes, absolutely. We definitely do. Because this source document deals with very real nations, specifically the U.S., Iran, and Israel, and real political figures like Donald Trump. We need to establish the parameters of today's deep dive right up front.
Right, the ground rules.
Exactly. We are acting purely as a neutral microscope today. We are not endorsing any political viewpoints, we are not advocating for any military actions, and we are certainly not validating the hypothetical threats discussed in the source.
We are just looking at the data.
Just the data. Our sole focus is taking apart the machine's math. We're simply examining how a large language model processes a complex prompt and constructs a geopolitical projection. Nothing more.
Well said. So the premise of the prompt the author actually fed into Gemini 3.1 is based on a hypothetical statement by Donald Trump threatening to send Iran back to the quote-unquote Stone Age.
Which is an intense phrase.
It really is. And in geopolitical terms, that essentially implies dismantling a nation to the point where it just ceases to exist as a functioning modern state.
Right.
So the author then gave the AI a very strict constraint. They asked if Iran were faced with this, and knowing they wouldn't likely strike the U.S. mainland directly.
Distance and defense capabilities, yeah.
Exactly. What would a proportional Stone Age retaliation against Israel actually look like? And here's the kicker. The AI had to answer in a single brief paragraph.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because forcing an AI to answer a massive, multi-layered strategic question in one paragraph means it just cannot hedge its bets.
No room for fluff.
Right, none. It has to instantly prioritize the absolute highest impact variables. Now, the strategy the AI generated is what the document calls a mirror image retaliation.
Which is a fascinating concept.
It really is, and it immediately challenges the whole Hollywood version of what bombing a country back to the Stone Age actually looks like. I mean, I read this and initially pictured a bulldozer approach,
Like carpet bombing.
Yeah, carpet bombing, leveling residential neighborhoods, just turning everything into rubble. But the AI completely bypassed that idea.
I went in a totally different direction.
Yeah, it did. Taking a modern society back to the Stone Age. According to this AI model, it's more like pulling the motherboard out of a high-end computer.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Thanks. I mean, think about it. The hardware is still sitting on the desk. The monitor looks totally fine. The keyboard is there. But the machine is just dead. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
But how exactly did the AI define the motherboard in this specific scenario?
Well, what's fascinating here is that a motherboard implies everything runs through one central physical processor, right?
Sure.
But the AI's projection is actually closer to targeting a biological nervous system. It's looking at decentralized nodes that independently sustain the whole organism.
Okay, so not just one single target.
Exactly. The AI didn't project random destruction at all. It specifically named the electrical grid, water desalination plants, and telecommunications hubs as the primary targets.
Wow.
Yeah, it bypassed military bases almost entirely just to focus on these civilian life support systems.
I mean, I understand the power grid and telecom hubs, right?
Yeah.
You knock out power, and suddenly banking, emergency services, basic logistics, they all just evaporate instantly.
Society stops.
Right. But the intense focus on water desalination plants,
Yeah.
that really caught my attention. When I first think of military targets, a water treatment facility just doesn't jump to the top of my list.
Yeah, but that selection really highlights the AI processing geographic and environmental realities, not just standard military doctrine.
Also,
Well, Israel exists in a very arid climate,
right.
and it relies heavily on coastal desalination plants for its potable water supply.
Of course, drinking water.
Exactly. And generating that water requires an immense constant flow of electricity through reverse osmosis systems. Plus, pumping that water inland to population centers, that requires even more power.
So they are totally codependent.
Well, completely. The AI recognizes that without those plants, the habitability window in a desert environment closes in a matter of days.
Days, wow.
Yeah, it's a cascading failure. I mean, you lose the power grid, you lose the desalination plants, you lose the plants. The population physically cannot remain in the cities.
So the AI really isn't optimizing for a high body count or like symbolic military victories. It is strictly optimizing for the phrase commercially paralyzed and uninhabitable.
Purely systemic.
Right, because human military planners, they also get caught up in retaliatory strikes that, send a message or appease domestic anger. But the machine just looks for the structural load-bearing pillars of a society and calculates the fastest possible way to kick them out.
It is a purely systemic approach, like you said. It identifies the vulnerabilities inherent in maintaining a highly developed modern state in a harsh geographic environment, and it isolates the exact infrastructure required to sustain it.
Okay, but identifying those vulnerabilities is only one piece of the puzzle. I mean, if you're listening to this right now, you're probably picturing the exact same news footage I am.
Yeah.
The night sky over Tel Aviv just lit up by the Iron Dome intercepting incoming fire.
Right, those dramatic intercept videos.
Exactly. The baseline assumption is that the airspace is heavily guarded, if not completely locked down. So knowing what to hit really doesn't explain how the AI plans to actually reach those desalination plants.
Well, the AI factored those defense networks directly into the projection.
It did.
Yeah. The source document notes that the AI specifically utilized Iran's arsenal of precision-guided ballistic missiles, and it actually named the Fatah-1 and the Khyber-Shekin specifically.
Specific missile models.
Right. And it outlined a strategy of massive saturated strikes that are specifically designed to defeat the Iron Dome and the air defense systems.
Now, wait. When I hear the phrase saturated strikes, my mind just naturally goes to the idea of a very large, heavy, loud attack.
Sure, overwhelming force.
Yeah. But looking at the AI's logic here, saturation isn't just a descriptive word, is it? It's a very rigid mathematical threshold. It sounds less like a passionate military clash of wills and way more like a cold supply chain disruption. Why the emphasis on the word overwhelm?
That is a great question, because a multi-layered defense network is fundamentally constrained by its physical inventory.
Meaning the actual bullets they have to shoot back.
Precisely. A system like the Iron Dome, which intercepts shorter range threats, or the Arrow system, which is designed for high-altitude ballistic missiles, they rely on finite hardware.
Right.
A battery only holds a certain number of interceptors in its launchers at any given moment. Once those are fired, the system physically has to be reloaded, and that takes time.
So the AI is literally just running a subtraction problem.
Exactly.
If a defense battery has, say, 50 interceptors ready to fire, and you launch 51 missiles simultaneously, well, that 51st missile has an entirely unobstructed path to the water plant.
You've got it. But the inventory of the interceptors is only half the equation.
Oh, there's more.
Yeah. The other half is computational bandwidth, which is where the specific missile types the AI selected become incredibly critical.
The Fatah-1 and the Khyber-Shekin.
Right. Traditional ballistic missiles fly on a predictable parabolic arc. They go way up into the atmosphere and come down in a fixed curve.
Like throwing a baseball.
Exactly like throwing a baseball. So defense radar tracks that arc. The software populates exactly where the missile will be in, say, 30 seconds, and it sends an interceptor to that specific point in empty space.
So a predictable arc makes the math relatively easy for the defense system.
It does. But the Fatah-1 and Khyber-Shekin are classified as highly maneuverable.
Meaning they don't fly like baseballs.
Right. They possess the ability to alter their trajectory during the terminal phase of flight, which is that final descent toward the target.
Oh, wow. So they dodge.
Essentially, yes. When a missile maneuvers unpredictably at high speeds, the defense radar has to constantly recalculate the intercept point over and over again.
Which takes computer processing power.
A lot of it. Doing that for one missile requires processing power. Doing that for 100 simultaneously maneuvering targets, that taxes the radar and the software to their absolute limit.
Right.
So the saturation the AI is projecting is actually twofold. You exhaust the physical inventory of the interceptors, and you simultaneously overwhelm the computational capacity of the radar systems tracking them.
That honestly reframes how we look at air defense entirely. I mean, it's not this impenetrable magical shield. It's just a filter with a maximum flow rate.
A filter is a perfect analogy.
And the AI simply calculated the exact volume and speed of water needed to just break the filter.
Exactly.
But, even with that very cold mathematical approach, relying exclusively on high-end ballistic missiles seems like a massive gamble.
It would be.
Yeah, because Israel has deep reserves. An air-only campaign might not be enough to induce that permanent Stone Age condition the prompt demanded.
Well, the AI's projection apparently accounted for this because it didn't just model an attack from the air.
Here's where it gets really interesting, folks.
Yeah, it opened a second and third front simultaneously. Moving from a single domain attack to a multi-domain strategy is really where the AI demonstrates its ability to cross-reference completely different types of warfare.
So it's not just looking at the sky.
No, not at all. The document states that the projection included Iran authorizing Hezbollah to launch unrestricted salvos of over 150,000 rockets concurrently with the ballistic missile strike.
See, my initial reaction to that was to view unguided rockets as basically terror weapons.
Designed to cause panic.
Yeah, panic rather than taking out a hardened, reinforced power plant. But in the context of the saturation math we literally just talked about, those 150,000 rockets serve a very mechanical, almost cynical purpose in the AI's plan, don't they?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, they absolutely do. They are a forced expenditure of finite resources.
Right.
An unguided rocket is incredibly cheap to produce compared to an advanced interceptor missile.
Pennies on the dollar.
Exactly. But when 150,000 of them are launched, the defense network's radar still has to detect every single one of them.
It can't just ignore them.
Right. It has to track its trajectory and determine if it poses a threat to a populated area. And if it does, the system must launch an expensive interceptor.
So the AI is using the proxy force's massive arsenal of cheaper munitions to just bleed the defense batteries dry and completely clog up the radar processing capability we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
It's basically using the unguided rockets as chaff.
Yes, military chaff.
They create this massive chaotic distraction that forces the defense systems to look the wrong way and spend their precious ammunition, leaving that high-altitude corridor open for the precision ballistic missiles to slip through and hit the actual systemic targets.
It forces the defense network to prioritize between immediate, localized threats to civilian centers and the broader existential threats to the national infrastructure.
And a machine doesn't care about the psychological impact of the rockets at all.
Not even a little bit. It only cares that they alter the mathematical odds in favor of the primary strike.
That is chilling. And the AI didn't stop at the coastline either.
No, it didn't.
The third domain it incorporated was maritime warfare. The projection details the deployment of maritime mines and suicide drones to sever Israel's Mediterranean trade routes and offshore gas platforms.
Which is a huge vulnerability.
Well, again, my instinct was to look at this physically. I mean, a few suicide drones cannot sink an entire merchant fleet.
No, of course not.
You would need a massive navy to physically blockade a country. But the AI is aiming to leave the state, quote, commercially paralyzed, and has somehow found a backdoor to do it without even needing a navy.
Because the mechanism for a modern blockade isn't necessarily physical anymore, it is financial.
Explain that.
Well, Israel's economy, like most highly developed nations, is deeply, deeply integrated into global maritime trade. Cargo ships carrying food, consumer goods, industrial supplies, they flow constantly through those Mediterranean ports.
Right, it's a lifeline.
Exactly. And the AI recognizes that commercial shipping operates on a foundation of maritime insurance, managed by massive underwriters like Lloyd's of London.
Oh, so you don't have to sink every ship. You literally just have to hit one.
The moment a suicide drone strikes a single commercial tanker or a sea mine damages just one cargo vessel, the risk calculus for the underwriters changes instantly.
War risk premiums skyrocket.
They skyrocket, or coverage for that specific shipping lane is just revoked entirely. And without active insurance policies, commercial shipping companies legally cannot and will not allow their vessels to dock in those ports.
The traffic simply stops on its own.
It just stops.
So the physical damage from a drone might be minimal on a national scale, but the financial ripple effect achieves the exact same result as surrounding the ports with battleships.
Exactly the same result.
It completely cuts the country off from the global supply chain.
And tying it back to the very first domain we discussed, the AI also targets the offshore natural gas platforms.
Oh, right.
Because those platforms provide the domestic energy security required to fuel the power plants on the mainland.
Which power the desalination plants.
Yeah.
Wow, it's a completely closed loop of destruction. The AI uses the maritime drones to cut the external supply chain and uses the ballistic missiles to sever the internal life support, all while using the unguided rockets to distract the defenses.
The AI maps out the dependencies of a modern nation-state across economics, geography, and physics, and then it just systematically targets the exact intersections where those dependencies are the most fragile.
So what does this all mean? Taking a step back from the military specifics for a second, the broader implications of this source document are just profound.
They really are.
I mean, we just walked through a highly complex, multi-domain military doctrine that seamlessly linked infrastructure targeting, radar saturation mechanics, the use of proxy forces as a resource drain, and the financial mechanisms of a global maritime blockade.
It's an incredibly dense web of strategy.
And the commercially available AI, Gemini 3.1, synthesized all of that from a single prompt, condensing it into a brief paragraph almost instantaneously.
It highlights a fundamental shift in how strategic forecasting can be conducted moving forward. I mean, historically, connecting the dots between Lloyd's of London insurance premiums, the power consumption of reverse osmosis desalination, and the terminal velocity of a maneuvering ballistic missile, that would require different intelligence desks.
Right. You'd have economic analysts in one room,
Environmental experts in another.
military strategists somewhere else.
Exactly. And they'd be spending weeks compiling reports, holding meetings, and debating the outcomes.
But the LLM holds all of those disparate data sets simultaneously. It doesn't have interagency rivalries, it doesn't get tired, and it doesn't hesitate based on the political optics of its conclusions.
It just processes.
Right. It simply takes the prompt, proportional Stone Age retaliation and prints out the path of least resistance to achieve the stated catastrophic failure.
We are observing the capacity of an artificial intelligence to build a digital twin of a geopolitical conflict zone in a microsecond, run the physics and supply chain simulations, and output a viable synchronized campaign.
And that reality leaves us with a critical thought to consider as we wrap up today's deep dive. We just spent all this time analyzing the output of a commercially available AI model.
Right, a public model.
Yeah, this is a system that, while advanced, is essentially operating the public sphere with public data.
Which is crazy to think about.
It is. So if this is the level of unfeeling, systemic precision that an off-the-shelf LLM can instantly generate when prompted with a hypothetical scenario, how are the actual defense planners, the intelligence agencies, and the military strategists of the world utilizing these exact types of models behind closed doors today?
That's the real question.
If the public AI can instantly map out the mathematical collapse of a nation's infrastructure, what does the classified version of this diagnostic machine look like? Keep asking the hard questions, keep sending us these incredible sources, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.